What's up, reefers? How's it going? So we got severed today, and as the announcement said, we had John from Clam Mania. Well, unfortunately, John's plane was a little delayed. He's in Poland, haha, and he'll be joining us shortly. So he's just making it through customs and his clearance, and he'll be joining us in just a few minutes. So we're gonna give everyone a chance to come in, say hello, ask any questions you might have about clam care, what their needs are, placement, stuff like that. And we'll circle back to that when he joins in just a couple minutes. So, Sever, while you're here,
Yeah. So
maybe.
hello everybody, and I just have a text with John, and he's just passing through the custom clearance, and he expect to be to sit somewhere in the airport and join us in 5 maybe 10 minutes. He has a long flight, probably like even like 12 hours from LA to Warsaw in Poland, and he will miss the flight because he will visit us in our company, and he will visit me in my home, and yes, so he will try to catch us, and share with us his secret about how to keep clams. It's a very interesting topic because clams are very sensitive animals, and
Yeah.
they are very fragile to good water conditions, and I think that the person who will know the more, I mean the most of about clams, that will be John. I know that he's importing clams from Tahiti, from Red Sea, from Egypt, and other nice places, and he keep these clams sometimes even a year before he will sell them. He also told me before that for example, it's very important to have the clams in good condition. For example, I didn't know that I have a Bristol worms in my tank, and I always thought that because I had some clams for a year too, and after they, well, maybe no, but it was in the past. Now I know that I have this blister worms, and I didn't bought it because I was afraid to, that they will eat the clams, and he told me that it's not necessary because if the clams are healthy, from the beginning, if you will
Mm-hmm.
receive them in good condition, they are strong enough to not be eaten by Bristol worms, and if they are injured somehow, then the all cleaner crew can just eat them,
Right.
and this is how it is. And I had a very nice clams in the past, really nice, and for a long time, but somehow during the time, I don't remember why, but I just lost them, one or two. I thought that one night they were just empty, that
Mm.
something ate it, and like 2 days before it was perfect, and in the morning I just found out that there's nothing inside. So I automatically blame it the some parasite, not the parasite, but let's say some Bristol worms or
Sure.
something else that just ate it. But it's and John told me that it's not necessary, that if you will have the right, in the right condition, from the right source, that somebody really take care to not sell you the clams just from importation,
Yeah,
or
freshly
just
harvested.
yes. And this is how it is. And the water condition is, I mean, we often talk about, what is good water,
Yeah.
for our tank. There's a tends to keep even now the high nutrients,
Mm-hmm.
high, let's say, how NO3 and PO4, the phosphate and nitrates. And honestly, I'm not super expert about clamps, but I saw many people that keep now relatively nice aquariums, even in the higher levels. I try to make some experience, and I keep my levels a little bit higher than usually, because before I have it 0.02 to 4, is, I mean, like a 0.0.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing that's changing now is we have a better understanding of nutrient import and export, right? And also the effect that light has and photosynthesis to NO3 and PO4. And so, keeping stable 0, isn't there going to be all that successful for folks? In that 5 to 10 range for NO3 seems to be the average today. But a lot of people are experimenting with this 10 to 30 range, and some people even higher, and seeing better coloration for that. But as they feed more, as the nutrients are higher, they're using other ways to balance those nutrients from an export of either skimming or other means to do so. So I think that as you said, we're starting to see people really just deviate and see what's the right way to go, as opposed to back in the late 80s and 90s when everyone wanted to hit 0. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 was what people were aiming for, and maybe that's why we had brown corals back then. So as we've learned more, our methods are changing and evolving too.
Yes, but from my observation, there's a difference. Of course, 0, it's probably nobody has 0.
Undetectable.
Yeah, undetectable, because maybe in the moment that they will make the test, it will be 0, because there's nothing. No, always, if you feed corals, if you feed fish, there's always some phosphates in the water. But to keep it very low, and to keep it, but I observe also very nice tanks with higher nutrients. I mean, higher phosphates, above 0.1. But I'm not sure now, but I believe that I didn't saw really, really nice coloration of SPS tanks. Really, I mean, I don't talk about like blue or purple, because that's kind of easy. But to see blue with white tips, with the orange, circle around, like 2, 3 different colors in one SPS. This is something that I observed, that this extreme colors came usually. Wow!
Hey, John, you made it.
It was like me. I was running. I was right there. I'm like, bring my bags. Hustle. Come on, Don. Come on.
No, but you had the time to take your coffee.
Yes.
No, because I didn't want to, use the Wi-Fi for free. So I had to like, oh, miss, can I pay this? And I'm like, try to set up. Oh, thank you very much. And then boom. I don't want coffee. It's nighttime.
So we are live. And
oh, hi.
So for everyone who doesn't know, John Bui is the owner, founder of Clam Mania, who, as we set up earlier, has some of the nicest clams in the world, and has really taken a passion to making sure that they're cultivated for many years at his farms, and then brought into to his facilities in California, and then shipped around the US and around the world. So he's actually in Poland right now. So we had a chance to connect with him. And as we said earlier, he's going to be staying with Sever for a couple of days and visiting the Aquaforest facility. But we had the chance to have him on today's live stream. So John, thanks for joining us. I know you've had a long flight, but welcome to the Tank Talk.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here, and I look forward to being on this Tank Talk. And it's great that you guys are giving such great information about everything. And I do specialize in clams. I've been culturing clams since 2011. And my passion started since I was 6 years old. But the culturing clams since 2011 till now, I definitely learned a lot of things about clams. So I just wanted to share some of the information as far as from the beginning of clams, just go into the nature and see how nature does it best, and then what we try to do is we try to mimic what nature does, and maintain that, from culturing the clams to growing the clams to keeping it for 10 years and on. And what I also do is do a lot of research where how far clams been in existence for billions of years. So there's so much information about clams that you can learn with clams that you can learn with corals. Yes.
Yeah, and being able to study some of those, the clams and the giant clams, and being able to, again, take that more archaeological approach and see what the oceans were like then, what the pH levels were, by looking at the strata of their shells to see how the acidification of the ocean has indeed changed the thickness and the density of the shells. And what we do now, as you said, you're taking them from a cultured environment in the ocean to put them in a home aquarium. Maybe what's some of the transition that you see to help somebody to be happy as a clam?
Actually, the most important thing is, first you have to make sure you have a good, healthy specimen. So You want to make sure from the very beginning, whoever has the clam has taken care of it. Whether it's a provider from initially from, let's say, if it's a wild clam from the islands. So usually, if it's a wild clam, it goes from the island, and then to some distributor, and then to some wholesaler, and then to some retailer, and then to yourself, right? So the issue with this is that clams are invertebrates, which means they're a lot more sensitive than, let's say, some corals and things like that. So you have to have a very soft handoff, but knowledgeable handoff. You have to trust the person who's had it before you knows what they're doing. If they don't, if they just kind of take the clam, don't know how to acclimate, don't know what they're doing, and it goes from, or even if you get it from straight from the person who's collecting it, he doesn't know how to collect, he doesn't know how to store it. You know, there's a lot of things that has to be done right to make sure you get to make sure you get a healthy clam to end with, right? But one of the most important things.
John,
Yes.
please tell us how we should acclimate in the right way the clams, because you
Yes. Yes.
mentioned about this, and just maybe more practical information, because that's a kind of funny thing. Honestly, it would be nice to know from your perspective.
Yes. Yes. You know, we actually made a Clam Mania acclimation guide, and that's what I was actually leading towards. Is that everything is about acclimation. The number one important thing, if I get it from me and I give it to Severin, Severin gives it to Aaron, that he has to make sure everybody has to acclimate it right. Acclimation is it's simple, but yet it's a little complicated. The main thing, the biggest thing for clams is pH swing. You want to have as minimal pH swing as possible. Now, there's three key elements. First thing is matching the salinity. Now, why do I say match salinity? Salinity is not always like the most important thing, but what happens in salinity sometimes too is also matching the trace elements in the salinity, right? Because as you know, the more concentrated salinity is, the more concentrated the other elements are. So you're trying to match that. Now, that won't be perfect, but at least you can get close to it. Now, so salinity is first, temperature, and then pH, right? Now, out of those three, pH is the most important one you really got to watch after. So when I tell my clients, I say, listen, I would rather you, instead of buying this clam, go buy a pH meter. You know, when you can afford a pH meter, it'll help you out big time. And especially not just a regular pH meter, but a pH meter that reads in toward the 100ths, right? So 8.10, 8.11, because what I'm trying to achieve, what I want to tell you is this is the number one thing. For every 0.1 pH is 20 minutes of acclimation. For example, if it's 8.0 to 8.1, I need minimum 20 minutes acclimation, right? So you can put a timer on it, and you can put your probe, and that's what we do. We always put a probe in the water as we're acclimating the water, so we can either increase the drip or slow down the drip, right? So from there, what you do is how you set up a system. So you get a acclimation, either a tray, a bucket, whatever, a container. And I'm going to tell you two ways. One way is you just get a tray, right? So it doesn't matter how many trays it is, or how big the tray is. The more clams, if you have 10 clams, you need a bigger tray. One small clam, small tray. But the procedure is exactly the same. So what you do is you drip, right? It's usually 1 or 2 drops per second, right? Now, the more volume water, you're going to drip faster to hit that 0.1. That's why the pH meter is very important, right? So what you do is you set up the tray. Ideally, if you can get a small heater inside, right? So whatever the temperature of your tank is, make sure the heater is exactly the same. So measure it ahead of time. Make sure it's accurate, or at least accurate to each other, right? So if your tank is running at 78, make sure that's at 78. Get a tiny pump. So this is the ideal situation, right? Get the tiny pump, get the heater, make sure the circulation's for oxygen, right? Because otherwise you're dripping. If your salinity is different, it gets kind of like, if it's lower salinity, the water just rises on top. So you're not really truly mixing the water. Does it make sense? So you want to get a pump. Also, I did some studies with, if I did a bubbler, right? Add a little bubbler. Bubbler, believe it or not, will raise the pH very fast, much faster than a pump. So I usually add a bubbler in there too. And I can put a bag, the lower the pH that is in the bag, if the clam or the coral comes in at 6.0 pH, which sometimes it does. And that's usually because people don't put oxygen in the coral or the clam. So we put heavy oxygen, low water, heavy oxygen, just to make sure the pH is high as possible when it arrives at your door. Okay, so there's a lot to this. So going back to the acclimation, what you do is put the pump, the air stone, and the air stone will raise your pH in the first 10 minutes almost 0.5, right? So that's a good thing if your pH is too low. Let's say it's like 7 and below, definitely put an air stone. So we always put an air stone, a pump, and a heater. From there, once we know the water's going for oxygen, gas exchange, right, and temperature, so you don't need to do a double part. You don't need to do a people let's grab the clams in the bag to put it in the tank for like half an hour, whatever it is. I'm like, you're wasting your time. It's get the pH slowly risen, right?
Yeah.
So ideally, you put 2 drops per second the first 30 minutes, right? But ideally you do want to watch the salinity and the pH rise. As long as it's rising 0.1 pH for 20 minutes, that's what you're looking to do. At the very end, you want to match the pH, salinity, and temperature, right? So whether it takes you an hour or 3 hours, it depends on how big the pH swing is, right? Now there's another thing about that too. I find out that let's say you drip. People always give you like a timeline. Oh, just drip 1 hour, you're fine. You know, at 2 drops per second. It's not that easy. Here's the complicated part. At 7.8 to like 8.2, it's so hard to raise that pH, right? So what you have to do is you have to increase the flow by a lot. Once it hits 7.8, I know my flow has to be a lot higher, meaning per drop has to be a lot faster. Instead of like 2 drops, I go to like 5 drops or even like a stream. And now that's why it's very important to have that pump, so it mixes the water a lot better. So you really have that true mixing of the pH mixing. So at the same time, you have to scoop all the water out, because otherwise it gets too diluted, right? If you have so much volume of water and you're just dropping more per second, no big deal. It doesn't even affect the pH at that point. So at that 7.8 to 8.2, you need to crank that water up and take water out, right? So that's what's a little more complicated there. But as long as you learn to do that procedure, you're fine. It sounds hard, but it's very easy. So let's recap. Pump, heater, air stone, right? Drip 2 seconds for the first half an hour. After that, double the speed, measure the pH. If it's not climbing, hit the water more and take more water out. And at the end, once that pH matches, salinity and temperature matches, you're golden. Then you can put it in the system. Now, another one is the same procedure. Just put it in your sump with your tray, and that way the temperature is acclimated. You can walk away, it'll drip, and if it overflows in your sump, no big deal. So that's another way of doing it.
Yeah.
And you said that you're putting together a guide. Where can people find the guide to see more and the method?
You know, I've been sending the links to that to everybody, but what I'm gonna do now is I'll post a video and I'll put a link to my Instagram page, and then people can hit the page and go from there. Yeah, that'll be. I'll probably do that when I get back. Yeah.
And for those of you who are watching this,
we can also tag our tank talk with the guide from Clam Mania.
I will absolutely.
No. You know what we're gonna do is Severin and I are gonna make a video.
All right.
Together. This time around, in the next few days, we'll make that video. Severin and I will talk. We'll make the video, and then we can. What you see in ours, and also Tank Talk, and wherever Severin wants to put his. Yeah, for sure. We gotta see his. Huh?
I hear a little trip maybe to Egypt coming in the next 24 hours to get a clam to be able to. I'm just kidding, guys.
It will be easier to find here in Poland sometimes. I know where.
But so those watching now and those watching later, what we're going to do is we're going to have a couple different links. We're going to be able to cross-reference the link that John is talking about, and we'll put in the description for this video for those on YouTube who are watching this later, so you can get that guide. We'll also put some other links available that we'll have on the Aquaforest page and for the Facebook group. So again, for those who are watching now and watching later, for everyone who's had questions, and again, please keep asking the questions. We'll make sure that we get them answered for you guys.
And this is generally what John just said, that it's kind of difficult to acclimate. For somebody who knows, it's kind of normal procedure, but for people who never did that, they just ignore it and put just directly or just heat the temperature, nothing else, because it's not normal oral, as John said. It's just it's not LPS coral, which is just temperature and everything will be
Yeah.
fine. Clam are
Yeah.
very, very fragile animals, and it's very funny because we, for example, in my city here, we have a very good tap water to drink, and they have it in the place where they clean the water. They have a clams, freshwater clams, that they show
Oh.
them quality of the water. If something is wrong, the clams closed.
Yeah.
If their water is good, they are open, and which is kind
Yeah.
of it's a kind of barometer. I don't know. Yeah, probably of the
Yep.
barometer. There's the right word.
Get the
Yeah,
barometer.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
barometer
Yeah.
of the condition of the water, and probably in the tanks as well. If you have a beautiful, but I know that the clams, if they are acclimated, if they have a good light, if they are for certain time in the tank, they are more resistant and resilient. And it's yeah, but generally they are very fragile. But extreme beauty of these animals are worth to do so.
So some of the questions that people have been asking John is about the size of a clam and what their needs and expectations are. So what are the differences of needs from a small clam, a inch, 2-inch clam versus that of maybe a 4 or 5-inch clam? So do you mind maybe sharing some of the needs, expectations, and feeding differences between them?
Yeah, you know what? Surprisingly, it's not much different. We have to be very careful. There's a lot of myths out there, and I hear even experts kind of regurgitate the same information. And it's not their fault because a lot of people just keep on saying the same thing over and over. And one myth is like under 2-inch or something like that. I think is what people say that they need to be fed. Well, giant clams, only time they really need to be fed or anytime they need zoothelia is when they're like at the very larval stage, and that's when we introduce zoothelia. Interesting fact that giant clams are the only things and the creatures in the coral reef that provide zoothelia to the rest of the coral. So, for example, if there's coral bleaching, the zoothelia clams are always releasing zoothelia. I have bags full of zoothelia on a daily basis if I'm shipping out clams. So they reseed the corals. So why I mentioned zoothelia is that's the most important thing in clams as far as feeding. It feeds the clam, right?
Mm-hmm.
So going back to the myth is that they will depends on okay, every species is different as far as how much light they will consume. As far as for example, number 1 is Durasa, number 2 is Crisia, followed by Maxima. What I'm talking about is light dependency of feeding, right? As far as how much light will they feed versus how much they will consume of certain phytoplanktons and only certain strands though, which we have to cover later on because people are feeding things that don't even feed them. So to be very careful and it's just wasting. It's good for the rest of the corals, but some things they don't eat. So 2-inch clams or 1-inch or 4-inch or 5-inch or 10-inch, majority, especially Durasa, I think their light dependency is like for food consumption, it's like 99%. Dross's number 1, Crisia, and then Maxima, they're both at like 98, 97% as far as how much feeding they need from lighting. They're mostly dependent on lighting, right? The rest of them are lighting, but not as heavy, but still they're in the 90 percentile. So my point to this is that lighting is the most important thing. If you put good lighting and the lighting as far as numerically, PAR, speaking of PAR, from my experience, and we run our systems outdoors, indoors, breeding, and I find the magic number where the clams live. I find the magic number where the clams thrive, and I find the magic PAR number where the clams decline, right? So whether it's 2-inch to 10-inch, it's very important. Lighting is the most important thing right there. So for the magic number is anything over 100 PAR would be sustainable. 150, they're thriving. 250 and above, they're doing great. That's going to be all the giant clams that we usually see in the market. We see about 6 different species of giant clams in the market. Currently, there's 9 total giant clams that are out there. That 3 of them that you don't see often. So it's lighting. Whether it's 2, 3.
The source of light? I mean, how about
Oh,
how about the kind of light, for example? Because
ah,
the temperature of light, what source of light?
the,
Light is, of course, there's a lot of source of light. You can have a
True.
HQI, you can have a T5, you can have LED light, and you saw
Yeah.
some significant difference on the what kind of light you use for clamps.
Yes and no. The general answer for what I tell my audience who are at the shows, and especially newbies, I say all the reef core reef ones that are good brand names that we respect. Definitely all of them. You can tune it where it's all blue or a little more of the 20K where it's more like daylight. It's totally fine. The difference is more for visually for your eye. You have to remember a, a clam is 50% plant. It's so based on just like a plant. Nitrates, phosphates, they need nitrogen and phosphate too. And it is a very small portion to live. So just like a plant, you add more fertilizer, whether it's phosphate or nitrates, they grow. Well, clams are similar to that. So they do consume nitrates and phosphates. As far as lighting, go back to lighting, the full spectrum lighting is always best, meaning like if you like metal highlights are amazing because it's full spectrum, right? Visually, you can see it better as far as certain patterns. But it's like kind of like corals. When it comes down to, let's say you want, like if I put my orange clams or yellow clams, which is like Dorasis, under like more blue, it looks more of like a crazy pink, like crazy amazing orange colors, right? So it's like similar to coral sometimes when you have the efflorescence where you tune up the blue, you can see more pop. But clams in general, they are very honest. You don't need filters. You put white light and it's just super bright, super shiny. Um, uh, so any spectrum from
Probably 6,500
67,000
up.
above, yeah,
Yeah.
6,500 and up, you should be fine. It's really tuning that to what you like to see at that point.
So
Yeah.
there's a couple of questions in here about what types of lighting do you like to use on your systems? Metal halides, T5s, LED, and we've seen in some of the pictures and videos. But the question is, what do you like to use, and do you notice a difference or a preference that the clams have?
Honestly, all the lightings, whether it's T5s, HQI, metal highlights, LEDs on the market, all of them will give growth and health. It's really based on the visual that you want to go from there. That's all it is for clams. For me, how we tune the lights is that we want to make it as almost whatever you see in the picture is what you see in real life. And the way I do that is I just do 15 red, 15 green, about 45 blues, whether it's purples or blues. Just any, if you have purples or blues in your that you tune in, whether it's any of the ones you can dial in, it's 45, and the rest is just white. White you can go up to 85 to 100. The reason I say that because the more you crank up the white, the more par you're gonna get, right? So whether you want to do less white, you can, or you can do max. It's up to you. That's really from there. It's more about a judgment of par. If you have too much par, tone it down. Now clams can be as far as in par. We have our systems running on the outdoor facility. The light is so different every day in California, right? Like consistently, we're pretty good, but we're not at the mid-equator area. We're subtropical, so meaning that we will get days that with clouds and things like that. So our par ranges from 100 on the summertime to 900. Either fine, and then the average for our outdoor facility summertime is about 400 par, whereas wintertime we have 50 par to only 200 par, which averages sometimes only 75 to 100. So that's why I know what clams will look like at what par for a period of time, and we can talk
And
more about coloration and yeah.
Yeah, and presumably
Oh,
the growth rates will change depending on the par levels and the duration that they'll get to, right?
yes, big difference. Exactly. So it's going to definitely absorb more alkalinity. Sorry, it's going to absorb more alkalinity if you have much more light. So the higher photo period it has, longer time, it's going to grow more. And as long as you can keep up with the alkalinity, it's when you have all the products that Sharon has, which is a great product you can put into that system. It's just keeping up with the growth. So whether you have on our display systems that we have at our shows, it could be no more than six gallons of water, very low, long and skinny, but I can have 250 clams there indefinitely, and I can start a whole system in one day and maintain that system as long as I'm dosing the good chemicals that like Severin has inside. Trusted chemicals is the key. Dosing at knowing how much your DKH is being absorbed in one day. For example, if you're testing at 12 p.m. one day, it's at 8. Next day, it's at 6. You're absorbing 2 DKH. So you just got to make sure you pace up with that. If you have less clams, you can dial it down. You bought more clams and dial it up. Yeah. So it will really grow based on your photo period and the
available
par.
local energy.
Yeah, and then also you make sure that you don't want to also burn the clam too, right? So you don't want to be consistent at 9. It's the way the ocean works. It's throughout the day it's like this, right? So average par 100 to 400, you're fine. Anywhere in there, you can leave it 12 hours a day or 8 hours, you'll still be fine. You would get less intensity of colors though if the par is less. For example, outdoor facility, gold clams, believe it or not, loses more detail. So I have some gold clams that are really cool, like very eccentric looking gold, greens, and all these different colors. And you see the different patterns intertwining. You can see the green is green, and the excuse me, and the gold is very gold. On the summertime, wintertime, when our par is less, our gold clams are not as brilliant, and the patterns go away. Summertime, the patterns come back and they're great. So now, as far as blue clams, they maintain blue, but not as intense and not as fluorescence if the par is less than 100. But anything over 100, you would get, again, 100, it would be adequate. Anything like 100, 150, excellent for colors and thriving.
And a couple of questions that recently have come up on, have shipping methods changed in recent years? And because they've made comments about pinched mantle becoming more and more of a common thing, and this is in Europe. Is it something that you're noticing the difference, and maybe what causes pinched mantle for those who may not be familiar?
Pinch mantle is more of a stressor. If you ever notice if one of the mantles is let's say in a little more. So a pinch mantle is usually it's not like the whole clam going in. That's if the clam goes in, that's just it reacting to light, whatever it wants to do. But if it's just like one little area in the shell that's going in and the rest is sticking out, it's just usually stress. And the pinch mantle usually goes away with good water quality and time. And we can also talk about freshwater dip. There's another freshwater dip method that we have too that I'll be glad to share with everybody. And that sometimes helps that too. But at the end of the day, even if you do a good water dip and things like that, you might have to do 2 or 3. But even then, you're just worried about infection. But from my experience, good water parameters, stability, it all goes away. It's more of just a stressor for sometimes a week or less. And anytime you see whether it's pinch mantle or the clam's not fully extended, do a water change. There's something in the water. As Severin was saying, they have good water there, but they show those clams as their invertebrates will tell you the first indicator they're not fully open. There's something in the water. And what I always tell everybody, you know what? Do a big water change, or even take that clam, put it in a bucket with a fresh bucket of water you made. That's been diluted and ready to go, but it's a fresh bucket that has no issues. Put the clam in there with a heater and a pump, and you're good. And then do a water change if you need to, rather than let it sit there and suffocate in the bad water and try to play mad scientist. Just do a good water change. Use Severin salt. It's great salt. Water change there. Yeah.
Do you notice that the rate of dissolved oxygen, or ORP, has a significant impact on the health of a clam?
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, definitely. You do want as much oxygen as possible in your system, because otherwise the load could be too much. There could be a lot of respiratory at night. That's why I always tell people, if you have a heavy system, you got to make sure you have good flow at night, because there's a lot of respiratory at night, or heavy fish load. There's a lot of respiratory at night. It lowers the pH, oxygen level goes down, all that goes down. Daytime, you're getting the COs being absorbed by the corals and the clams. Interesting. When I can have a pile of clams right here, and the tank could be this big, and I'll put the pH probe right where the clams are at. So let's say the pH right here in the corner is 8.2 on the clam where the clams are, where they're absorbing all the CO2. 8.4, 8.6, just like that. So
Wow.
it's if you
The
try,
micro
test that.
environments that it creates.
Just right there. I mean, if you just put it right next to the clam, I have videos I do all the time. I guess I don't share, but I have all these videos of me just putting next to the clam, and it's 8.5, and you put it, just 2 inches away from the water, it's 8.2, and it just shows. And the corals, if a big pile of coral, do that to your coral, you see the exact same thing. It's absorbing, especially if it's like middle of the day, lots of sunlight, or middle of your system, lots of light. Just put it right there, and you'll see how much it's absorbing. So going to your point is that at nighttime, if you have a heavier load of fish, your oxygen levels it's respiratory at night, right? So and there's no CO2 being absorbed at night too. So that's the issue. Yeah. So that you will see stress, and that's when you see most clams will die at night because the pH is usually lower and the respiratory is higher and oxygen is less. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So
Yep.
if
Makes
people say,
absolute
"Hey,
sense.
you know what, John, the clam was fabulous," and then I woke up. It's always the same story. I woke up and I said, "Have you been watching your pH?" "Oh, not really. I think it's fine." I'm like, it's just like leaving your children out at night in the cold every night, but bringing them in the day when it's nice and warm. Eventually, the immunity will be in effect, and they won't be as healthy, right? So, stability has a key role to play with stability of clams. Now, it's not that hard to maintain stability. You just got to know these tiny little things. And once you do that, your system just thrives. And it starts with acclimation. Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
a very obvious thing to mention that not all fish are allowed to live with clams, and this probably maybe everybody should know that, but there are people that maybe don't know that any angelfish or Helmond's or Stratus cannot be, or any other, maybe you can just mention which fish love so much the clams that they will just
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Navarchus, for example.
Well,
Navarchus, I remember that somebody just put Navarchus in the, and the next day all clams was gone.
gone. Yeah. Well, the biggest culprit would be like puffer fish, from my experience. So like in the wild, if you ever swim in the wild, you see like little bite marks off the clam mantle, and the clams survive. It's just when they're so small that the puffer can eat the whole clam and crush the shell. But if they're just biting a couple mantle pieces, the mantle will grow back in time very fast. Pufferfish is a culprit mainly. As far as like people are worried about butterfly fish and things like that. I've never had much bad experience with that, unless you get a really bad nipper or angelfishes. It's because you also see Severin. Severin does a lot of snorkeling too. He was in the Red Sea, and I was in the Red Sea recently, and there would be all these bigger puffers, all these things that people were worried about, butterfly fish and all that stuff next to the clams, and they're surviving fine. People can say but the thing is with those puffers and those guys, they kind of mark their territory like dogs. They're just kind of staying in one area, And same thing with a lot of the butterfly fish and things like that. So if they, they'll nip in here and there, but the clams are resilient. It's really the most important thing is chemistry, acclimation, chemistry is what I say is most important. So there's actually very few fish that actually will devour the clams or get it to a point where it's like they really want to just eat the whole thing. A couple nipping here and there is not bad. It's. I think owners were a little worried, but for me, I see how nature works, and I see it in our system. We prove it in our system. We're fine. If anything, those butterfly guys pick up parasites and the things that we want, anyways. Yeah.
So I'm quite surprised to hear that, because I was convinced. I saw even for example, Imperator, the Pomacanthus Imperator, that's or the Navarchus, or this kind of fish. They eat clams like crazy, but I'm maybe
Well,
better experience. But from my knowledge, it's not go. This fish with the
Yeah,
clams.
every fish is different. What I learned, not every fish. Like what I can tell you now, I say that I can't guarantee your fish. Somebody's fish could be totally different from my fish. You know what I mean? Like, I base it on my experience in the wild, and I will say caution. You can say caution to every fish. You never know, right? With fish, they're all kind of weird and have their own personality. So traditionally, yeah. I'm sorry.
Well, I know. I was just going to say it also comes into the amount of calories that fish is getting. If they're well fed and they're fed often, they're less likely to nip on your coral or a clam than they would if they're fed once a day and the quality of the food is lower calories, more fillers. they may be more willing to just explore and nip on things too. So in the ocean, in the wild, they have an abundance of stuff available to them. So the nipping may be less unless it's part of their natural diet, like a puffer. Versus in a home aquarium, if you're not feeding them to a frequency to keep them calorie sustained, they may be more likely to explore.
Yeah, and that's the thing with clams. They remember most of the clams made out of zooxanthellae, so they're trying to get the algae inside, right? Sometimes, if they're looking for that. Otherwise, the only concern you have to be concerned with clams is because giant clams are the only clams in the world that are photosynthetic. That's why they can get so big, right? So that's why we can get a half a ton giant clam that's the Gygas up to 4 or 5 foot. Because it's photosynthetic. Giant clams are the only photosynthetic clams in the world. The other clams that Sever mentioned in the beginning with the water treatment, they are filter feeders 100%. Yeah, so that's why they're able to grow so big and they have that algae that the fish like sometimes, or certain fish.
Yeah, great point on that. So again, guys, keep the questions coming. I appreciate that. I'm just scrolling back up through. Kenneth had asked a question about size of tanks, and so I'll read it to you. So he's got XR30 Pros in a 2 foot by 4 foot shallow tank. Overall tank, I think, was 105 gallons, and he's asking to put the clams on the sand bed. What would be the best clam that you would recommend for him?
Well, the best clam for him would be based on what he's looking for as far as display of clam. It's more of that or color. The reason I say that, because it doesn't matter what size you have. I mean, if you're okay with, I'm okay with having a 2 foot clam in a 30-inch as a main display. That's only 20 gallons or something, 25 gallons. My point is, it doesn't matter where the clam is placed, whether it's on the sand or on the rocks. It's all this lighting, good flow, and great chemistry. You maintain that, you can put it anywhere, because in the coral reef, they're either at 20 foot deep or basically 1 foot deep, right? These giant clams are at. So meaning that all they really care about is, am I getting my flow? Am I getting my line? Is my chemistry good, right? Am I in the lagoon where the water's stuck here for a while and no good water's coming in and out? I really, it's a question I get a lot. I tell people it's really up to you. As long as you get over 150 par is all you're shooting for. Lighting, good chemistry, and good flow. Flow for bringing food in and out, oxygen too, all that. So it's less work for the clam to do. It's more passive working. In my systems, I do lots of flow. I want as much flow as possible. Even when the mantle's like moving, just once in a while you see it moving like that. As long as I'm not doing it directly, but I want flow because I want the clam to do less work, have all the flow come to them. And then with the ripples, you have the nice par swinging from 50, 500. It gives them a little break, and that's why the extensions are wider, because you think about, they're basically solar panels, right? Yeah. Clams are solar panels, and they just extend wide. So if you get a system where the line's kind of poor and the line's very low on par, they'll extend more sometimes, and you think it's really healthy. Well, no, it's just extending because it isn't enough light, right? Yeah. Right, and then towards the end of the day, when it's too much light, they'll start closing up more, right? So clams are triggered by like a photoperiod. They'll get to know your system if at 8 a.m. your light goes on. Around 7, usually 1 hour ahead, they start extending and opening, ready for the solar panel to open, like open for shop, open to feed today. And then if your light goes off at 7 p.m., at 6 p.m., slowly you'll start retractorate, right? So that's how we base our live cells on that sometimes, based on what the lighting period and when they're going to actually open and when they're going to close. I can't determine when we're going to do. Yeah.
So some of the other questions are coming up around mantle care. So you and I have talked about this quite a bit, and the little rocks that you offer for the holders for them, and so Philip was asking about if a mantle is suffering from being torn or nipping. What to do about it, and how to make sure that clam could have the best chance of survival.
Is that meaning that he's worried about fish or something like that, or for mantle, it's.
Yeah, so his question was a couple. One, a general conversation about mantle care and about placing them and not tearing them off. But his specific question was about if it suffers a tear.
Oh, you mean the fish?
From the foot.
The foot.
Yeah.
Ah.
Oh, sorry,
foot.
I
Okay,
said the mantle. Sorry, the foot.
Okay. Okay, this is very interesting. The foot is, it's like a tongue, right? Like my tongue, your tongue. I can stick it out, right? And they use their tongue to stick out and they use it to move, right? Usually, they're much more mobile when they're small. Why? A, because they need to be able to move fast. And when they're small, they can move fast. And they need to move fast because they need to make sure if the flow is pushing and the rocks are tumbling, they need to find a spot that's not so, crazy. They want good flow, but they don't want to be tossed around. So what happens is that a smaller clam, being smaller, it's more mobile because it's not so heavy. Bigger clams are not as mobile because there's just, they're weigh like a pound, 2 pounds, sometimes a lot more. So as far as the foot goes, I was describing what the foot does, and when it's mobile towards the later stages, not so much. As far as a foot, people always has this misconception that a foot is the byssus. The byssus is, think of a spider web. Clams it takes energy, too much energy to build byssus, right? So they have to take time, build energy. They build this funny looking gelatin. Looks like, you ever see like a gelatin float around your system? And you're like, well, I know, I never got that until I got a clam. Well, that gelatin is basically the start of the formation of that byssus thread. So at the very bottom of the clam, you'll see like a gelatin being built. It's basically just doing a spider web. So there's nothing to do with the foot at all. This is the byssus. What you do is they have control of the byssus. It's like it's connected to them, and when they want, they can release the whole thing, the byssus, the threads. But what you do is you can just take your fingernails and you just scrape it slowly off, or you can just twist it clockwise slowly, and it's fine. It will release, and so you're not really hurting the clam at all. It's just taking you're just breaking it off the spider web, so to speak. I made a couple videos on my Instagram that shows what the foot looks like, and it looks just like a round tongue sticking out, like a clear, translucent tongue, semi-translucent tongue that just that comes in and out. So that part is never ripped. So there's no such thing as a ripped foot. There's a ripped byssus, yes.
Byssus. Good terminology for folks there.
Yeah.
and so you also offer a little frag clam byssus foot holder. And maybe talk a little bit about that and how that came to be.
Yeah, well, the reason why, because when we were breeding clams initially, the clams are, they start like 1 inch to, 3 inches, things like that. By 3 inches, they're usually like 4 years old. But even at that stage, they're pretty relatively small, the camera. Sometimes that small to that. They need something solid to hang on to because most people's systems, the flow is a lot stronger, right? Mm-hmm. So we're all trying to push flow. In the wild, they basically start at their spawning state. Once they've just become a little zygote and they start becoming a little clam, they will find a crevice. They're always looking for a tiny crevice somewhere. Mm-hmm. And they wedge themselves in there. Well, when we provide it for you, or you get it from somewhere else, the clam will be by itself. So I always put something solid underneath. The only reason I make that cradle is just because it has a flat base, so you can actually put it anywhere, whether it's on the sand bed, mm-hmm. You can glue it to a rock, because the clam you can use anything, a flat rock or whatever you want. Put the clam on top when it's small. If the water quality is good, they'll attach. Because the clam you can use anything. Sorry, I got some echoing.
Yeah, there's a bit echoing there. So you mentioned something about the clam liking a crevice. Do you find that the clams have a preference, or does it matter to them whether they're on a sand bed or they're actually in the rock? Because most of the time, most tanks, you see them on the sand bed. But do you see that clams thrive better if they're part of the aquascaping?
No, it's really, at the end of the day, it's lighting, chemistry, and flow. As long as they're happy there, they usually, if they're smaller, they will attach to something, whether it's even the bottom of the glass. They'll go from sand to the bottom of the glass. They'll suck down there, or they're fine if they have enough. If the flow is not pushing too much, they're full extended. They're happy too, because it takes energy to build the thread. So they won't build the thread if they don't need it. If they feel like a little insecure, like meaning that I feel a little too much wave, they'll build it really fast. Yeah, so it doesn't really matter. The only thing when it matters to the sand is you have like a sand goby that goes up and then spits all the sand on top of the mantle. Again, the mantle's where they feed. So if you're constantly kind of stressing out and making it. The funny thing, clams when they puff, they can direct where that water goes. So if it wants to shoot me in the eye, it can shoot me in the eye if it wanted to. And it will also puff just a little bit just to get the scent off, or puff strong if it needs to. So they have their own instinct of what they need to do. But the only time you don't want to put in the sand if you have like a fish that is that will create like a sand goby that put sand on top of it, or if your par is not strong enough, bring it higher. But as long as you maintain 150 par and above, you can put it anywhere you want. As long as chemistry is good, you can put it anywhere you want. It wouldn't matter. You know what I mean? You can see now. This is the thing with clams. You can see one area could be where it's fully extended, one area it's not extended. Sometimes you have to play with that. Either one area is too much flow, or not enough flow, or something like that, right? And every clam has its own personality. So which I've learned over time. I can put one in this corner. I'm like, wow, it was thriving. It was, the flow was just perfect there. I put it here, a little too much, it closes up. Okay, I'll put you back there. So that's another thing. But if you're always trying to maintain that chemistry is everything. That's where Severin comes in. He's got a great product for that. Yeah.
The Aquaforest products are great for that.
Yes,
yeah,
and tell
really.
me, what parameters do you keep in your tank? And just main parameter like alkalinity, like calcium, magnesium, and let's say potassium maybe. But just what magnesium and what range you try to keep for a
Well,
class?
a natural, just natural sea level. So even if, but the funny thing with that, it's really not. It's even if it's a little too little or a little too much. Whether magnesium is 1300 or 12, it's still okay. When it goes a little low, let's say calcium goes to let's say 350. Ideally, we should keep it as natural sea level, like whatever exactly from what your bag is perfect when it comes out. Sorry, when it comes out of the sorry, this is Jimmy Rig last minute, guys.
Good that you are here.
When it comes out of your bag, it's perfectly weighted. So I try to mimic that. But even if it goes away from the 450 of the calcium, whether it's 550 or 400, it's still okay. If it gets to 350, things like that, you'll see the clams won't be as open. So we maintain ALK usually at 8.5 to even 9, but it's okay if it goes to 7.5. But anything below 7.5 is more danger zone. You don't want to keep it too long because all it takes is a little, because for us, because we have so many clams that they absorb so much DKH, I can see if one day if my DKH is 8 and the clams look so happy, and next day it's 6, it looks happy too, but on the second day of 6, it doesn't look as happy. Does it make sense? So
but in the nature you will find 7.2 maybe in 35 ppt.
Yeah, which is fine. But once you get to the 6 is the issue, right? My point is you have to be very careful with us having a lot of corals things that sometimes if something goes wrong, you don't have either don't have the right equipment to measure exactly what your DKH is, or your corals are growing absorbing more than it is. We get busy in our day, we forget. So I like to put it a little higher, like 8.5, just to buffer, because for me, one day I could be from 8.5 to 5 right away. So for me, I just do play it safe. If you have a system with less corals, you don't have to worry as much. You can run at 7.5, no problem. Yeah. So anything over 7. Yeah.
The clams are fragile to fluctuation of KH, for example, the KH.
Of DKH, not so much. More pH. DKH, as long as they have enough they won't grow as fast. You have higher DKH, you can have, I would say 9.5 is safe, and they'll grow faster as far as shell and things like that. If you're running at like a 7, then the growth won't be as fast. Would they live? Yes. Would they thrive? Yeah, no problem. Would they grow faster?
My question was if they are fragile to fluctuation of these parameters.
Oh, no, not fragile. Just growth.
No, but I would like to say if, for example, the KH change, if they are suffering, let's say if one day you have 8 and next day you have 6, did you
swings?
The swings, fluctuation. I don't know why I use it. Maybe yes.
Yeah, I think it does in the long run a little here and there. As stable parameters as you can. We have systems that the more stable it is, the more they're bigger, happier, wider. Systems that are not stable, you can see it's not as healthy clams, not the same looking, not as healthy, not as vibrant. So yes, yeah, you want to keep that parameter whatever it is, keep it the same. If you do 7.5, maintain 7.5 as close as you can. Don't be 7.5 to 9 to 10. So for us, when we do water changes, we're very cautious on that too. We don't just dump. I think one of the other salts, their DKH starts at 10 or 12, some crazy number. So, you got to be careful of your system. And you do a big water change, you start from because it's not just the DKH in that salt, it's everything else that's a lot higher usually, and it depends what it is, right? So you can be bumping it like that. It's so you can see right away when you do things like that, the clam was super wide open, super vibrant in color. All of a sudden, it just shrank, and all the coloration kind of, not fade, but it just kind of, it's holding it in. It's not happy, right? Now, if you maintain the same water, same DKH, everything kind of coming in, no big deal. You'll see it looks exactly the same. Yeah. But they recover from that. But yeah, not too much of that. No.
And one more question for you, then we're going to let you get out of the airport, is around pests.
Yes.
So what are some of the common pests that clams can suffer from, and what can you do about it?
The only thing that ever pests, and we never had an issue with that, was pyramid snails, right? And you don't want to have a pyramid snail outbreak. But what we do is we keep a 6-line wrasse. We do wrasses, mandarin gobies, green dot gobies. We do those things that just sit there and peck. And what I like about them is I don't feed them at all. They just peck around, the system. So as long as we maintain that, we're pretty much pest free. We don't have anything. If we did, we would have a lot of dead clams. And remember, guys, people always ask me, John, do you scrape the clam shells? I mean, I can if there's lactasia, but something like that. But otherwise, the clam, even when it's with us for, a clam this big, could be 3 years old. That's a 3-year-old live rock. I mean, do you want to take your live rock and start scraping your live rock? We have a clam this big. That's 8 to 15 years old. I mean, you're welcome to scrape it, but you're just scraping live rock. That's why I'm able to start a system in one day with just clams. I put no fish. I put a doser on, right? So as long as I have a doser, I can maintain alkalinity, all the parameters I need, magnesium, calcium, all that stuff. And then if the rest of the trace elements, I can use some other products and put in there if I need to. But in reality, I can say I've done it many times. All my systems, I always start one day. I put a bunch of clams in. I put the first setup is water heater, pump, skimmer, and then I just a doser ready to set up, and then water, and then clams, lights, action. Go for 2 years, no problem. One day, boom. It's just that when you have too much fish, the parameters go kind of whacked, and too much feeding, things like that. But clam alone, you can do it. One thing I wanted to say before we end is I want to go back to the acclimation thing. When you receive a clam from a box from a provider, from myself or somebody else, what you will see is that I will do my best to put as much oxygen into the bag to maintain higher pH as possible. But what happens usually is it always drops. Anything you put into a bag, as soon as I put close the box, the light goes down, the pH drops no matter what. But the oxygen helps. But the point of this is, by the time I ship it to you, it lands, it's healthy, it's fine. It could be out of water the whole time. Clams are very resilient. But what happens is that pH swings this. You get the box usually afternoon, right? It's usually around 12, 12:30, 1, and then you start acclimating. By the time you get into your system or even start going, your pH could be at 8, but now by that time of the day, you're at 8.3, whatever it's going to be, sometimes 8.4. And if the clam starts coming at 7.6 or less, or 7, right? Think about that. That's a huge difference, especially my rule of 0.1 pH per 20 minutes. You are now trying to catch up to that, right? So that's even tougher. So meaning you got to really take longer, and you got to really crank up and make sure it matches that pH. If you do that, I ship hundreds to thousands of clams. I receive hundreds of thousands of clams in one time. And I acclimate all one time. People worry about acclimating one. I have videos of me of acclimating like hundreds to thousands. No death. I have full confidence. And I just follow my program. Boom, 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 boom. And Severin and I can play with that video. And I think I'd be the first video out there, Severin, because, as far as that. So I think it'll be a good idea to do that because people will really understand the details. It's not just dripping. Oh, yeah, I drip. Don't worry, John. Oh, no, there's more. Let me tell you more. So it's also matching. You have to realize when you get the clam, what time of the day, where your pH is at. I'm giving it at the lowest, and you're at your almost peak, right? You're close to the peak pH. Yeah, so it's another concern. But any more questions, I'll be glad to answer. I don't need to sleep. I like this. I like this. It's a nice airport, very nice Polish airport.
No, but it would be great if you go to a hotel after all your flight. So yeah.
Exactly. So we will conclude it here. But again,
Yes.
as John had mentioned, he and Sever are going to do some stuff over the weekend. So check out our Instagram page, our YouTube page. John's going to probably do the live stream of it as well. And we're going to talk through some of those things so you can check it out. But again, John, thank you for taking the time to join us today. I know you've had a long trip. I know you want to visit your family. So be well, get some sleep. And for everyone who's joined today's live stream, thank you so much. If you like that video, smash that like button, subscribe for more awesome content. And if you got more questions, you want to join us on a Tank Talk, let us know down below and we'll talk to you soon. So for now, happy reefing.
Happy reefing.
Take care. Happy reefing.